So hopefully the people who are still remaining are the ones who are interested in being part of ME310 SUAR. And yeah, we still have a lot of people who are joining us online as well. So let me talk a little bit more about it. But first, I want to share with you an intro video that we created several years ago, just to give you a feel and a sense of what the program looks like. And it was actually, a lot of it was filmed at the same day or same event, except where all the universities in the network came together to present. So this is from the Silicon Valley Expo several years ago.
Celebrating the creative productivity of our students at Stanford and elsewhere.
And today they're showcasing their work here at Stanford University, and we have 27 solutions built by 24 different universities, all working together on different design innovation challenges from corporate sponsors. Student teams from at least 2 different institutions, or on average 2 institutions, collaborate on a project for a full academic year. ME310, ME is mechanical engineering, and 310 is a master's level course, and that stretches all the way back to the late 1960s when we had a professor from MIT come here to Stanford and really tell engineers, build to think, be multidisciplinary, and truly understand your customer. So we've had a human-centered user philosophy for decades, and this has now just become really a movement across the world.
And our real mission is building people. So the project is a means to the end of building better people, better talent, and the real payoff for the company is to hire those people.
I would say for Japanese companies, it really is to embrace a new way of learning, and it complements the way that Asian companies also think about product development, project management, as well as innovative thinking.
Local people also can easily answer them without translation, effectively breaking through the language barrier.
This is going to facilitate connectivity between you. By the time you get there, you're going to be talking to a real live human being from another culture.
The reality of producing wine today is that 80% of the spray is wasted.
Here, body, and filter.
Student teams from universities at leading programs around the world. Last year we had about 150 teaching teams and students involved. This year we doubled it. We have about 300, and they are all united by the philosophy of design thinking, but also leading to innovative output.
Show you the good. Yeah.
So that would be true.
Can we see it in action?
Okay, Francesca.
Their most important asset is the people they met in the course. Not just the local students, but the global students. So for one of the first times in the history that I know it, a student is able at the master's level to build an international network that knows how to do teamwork. And And if you really want to change the world, it's got to be a team. Having a network is where you get your team for your next grand challenge.
Get involved, to be part of the movement, because this is something that part of 21st century learning and the skills that you need for any kind of work that you do.
Care of Sushi and Kyoto Institute of Technology, we're delighted. We hope to see more of this, and it's a key player in the world. It should be a key player in this network.
I think this is a great start, and certainly we have some teaching teams and companies in Japan, and so my recommendation is that's the first place to reach out and connect to, because you already have experts in your country and they can speak to this with firsthand experience.
So hopefully that gave you a little bit of a sense of what happens in ME310 SUAR and what the end results also look like. So let's dive a little bit more into the detail of what really is ME310 SUAR. And this is the phrasing that I use. It's a program where students from leading universities around the world, us included, work together with corporations to create breakthrough innovation. And there's two keywords or key phrases in there. One is breakthrough innovation. We really try to make something out there that doesn't exist that brings value to people. And for that, I want to talk to you about a project we did with Myanmar. You saw a little bit of it in the video as well. But the starting point for that project was actually this, innovation for vineyards. It was very much directly saying, hey, let's look into vineyards, see if we can come up with an entirely new product for them so that we could do something better. And of course, the team really went into a lot of prototyping. The early focus was actually more on harvesting and not pesticide application, as you saw. But all of these were failures. Through many of these failures, they learned that what doesn't work, but as well as what's actually important. And of course, it's also through talking to the farmers as well. But the place that they found out that was actually a real big issue was pesticide application. This is how pesticide is applied right now. It's a mess. Only about 20% of this is effective. The rest is waste. It's both expensive as well as not good for the environment. So the students said, aha, what could we do to make this better? How could we contain it? And this was one of the first time prototypes they created after that, thinking how could they apply pesticide in the control area? And the ultimate solution, you saw in the video as well, ended up looking like this. It's a system where 3 sides of the pesticide area is covered by a wall, and the other 2 sides are covered by air curtains, really giving a kind of a limited area so that they're not flying everywhere. And if you see it in a farm, it kind of operates like this. Now, the students didn't get as far as to building the machine, but you saw in the video that they actually did create a functioning working prototype at the end that they demonstrated with water for safety reasons as well. Another project I want to share with you is a project we did with Finland and ANA, where the topic was here, airports, and in specific airports for the elderly. And there were some really fun stories that came out of this project, but one was the Finnish team was doing research into elderly travelers, and they were at the airport, and they discovered this woman who was at the airport 1 week before her trip, doing research into how to actually use the airport. For people who are obviously traveled a lot, like airports are easy, but for elderly people who've never really traveled, the airports can be a really, really scary place. And they realize that there's so many things to do, and that information is not really that clear to people. So they end up focusing on this easy to understand information for elderly travelers to feel comfortable and be able to get through the airport. And a lot of the first prototyping happened on the phone, but in the end, the team created a device with a digital compass to navigate people both through the time, the process, and the physical location of the airport. And the idea is that when you check in, they will give you this device, and the compass will tell you exactly where you have to go next. And then by the time you get to the gate and you get on the plane, you give the device back. But the really cool thing about this project was that the team just narrowed it down to the most basic elements of what you need to get through an airport. They were originally looking into maps so that you can get like information on where the bathroom is, where the shops are, where the restaurants are, but quickly realized that maps are pretty complicated especially if you're looking at it for the first time. You just want that arrow to point you wherever you need to go. The other cool thing was that it had notification system. So if you're going by the last bathroom, or if you really need to get to the gate, all of this stuff will get notified to you. They didn't make a screen for this, but the key feature that I really like is when the gate changes, they also tell you. That's something I could even use because I usually have to look up on the screen. The last case study for the first part I want to share is with a company called Goer Tech. I'm sure most people have not heard of them, but they're kind of like Foxconn. They're contract electronics manufacturers. And this was a big topic. It was food and technology, and that's it. Where do you go with that? Well, obviously the team went through a lot of places, but the place where they landed on was this. I'm sure everyone's had it here, one of the Japanese soul food, ramen. The thing about ramen is that, well, we're now going into this era of delivery, especially accelerated by Corona. I'm sure some of you have ordered Uber Eats, maybe some of you have delivered Uber Eats, but ramen does not do particularly well with deliveries like this because you have to deliver it very, very quick. Now they're starting to work on some methods where it's kind of starting to work, but it's not quite there yet. And even then, in Japan, you can deliver within 10, 15, 20 minutes. But when you get to the US, where deliveries and distances are much, much larger, basically by the time you get your ramen, it looks like that. And there are other food that's very time sensitive like this as well. And what they ended up creating was actually a robot that makes ramen with this cute branding called Oni Ramen. And the idea is actually very simple. Normally you cook and deliver, but this one, you cook while you deliver. So by the time that the ramen comes to your door, it's very, very fresh. So it's a robot, but the concept is to ultimately put it into trucks, vans, delivery vehicles, and probably in the future, autonomous vehicles. Because autonomous vehicles delivering things are already being tested in the United States. So the interaction is probably something you would expect using an app to order, customize your ramen, and then voila, you get it. But you could actually see that with the flow. So it's quite intense. It's all of the fast forward to really fast. So this is a project between us and Stanford about 4 years ago. So the other key feature of ME310 SUAR is that it's universities working together. And it's really this notion of global collaboration. So this is the network diagram, or the kind of network diagram that we create every year. And you can see that there's a lot of universities being connected through projects. And we've been growing over the years. I think we peaked around 2017. So far, we've been a bit flat from there, and Corona's been a bit hard for the network because we can't travel. But there's about 26 universities and about 150 to 300 students every year. And I'm not going to introduce you all the universities, but some of the key universities, Stanford University, this is where it all started 20 years ago or so. Aalto University in Finland. I think we're a partner university with them, so some of our students actually study over there. You go over to Latin America, there's PUJ Colombia, or Cali in Colombia. They've been part of the network for a while. I've had the fortune to visit them. It's a gorgeous campus. We also have business schools in the network, it's like University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. And our longtime partners, we've done a lot of project with them, which is Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne, Australia. And it's been nice to work with them because there's not that much time difference. So how does this work? How does it all come together? Well, the strong point of view that has come out of Stanford is that diversity drives innovation. Having more diverse teams, diverse points of view, diverse minds, they're really the drivers of innovation. And this is why we do global collaboration. And this is also why we have teams being formed from students from 2 different universities. So for example, this is the project we did with Stanford. Both sides had 4 team members. And then to that team, there's a company that sponsors or that assigns or gives a project topic to work on for 9 months. And at each university, there is also a teaching team. So me, Professor Tatara, some of the TAs as you saw, and we're here to sort of both teach you, guide you, motivate you, help you, but ultimately it's your point to deliver. And every year, basically, there's just different combinations of this happening, like Alto and Trinity in Ireland doing a project for Audi, or SAP between Mexico and Germany, etc. And that's one node. One project is that node, and that's how it kind of expands into a global network. And we do come together at some point. I'll talk about it later. The calendar, the year-long project calendar, how it works. Because we work with universities abroad, we actually go from a September to June academic year timeframe, which I know is weird for Japan, but this whole new school year in April is very much Galapagos, and we can't stick with it if we want to do this kind of project. So we start in September, and at the beginning we have kind of like a warm-up activity. We've been doing paper bike. There's been some other activity as well. But very much after the warm-up, we all come together for this thing called the Global Kickoff Workshop, where all the students and the teachers in the network come together. Traditionally in Silicon Valley, this is a picture from back in the day, but now it's been in different places as well. And it's really kind of like a one-week intensive session, both to learn the approach, the mindset for how we do innovation in ME310 Sugar, as well as to also meet your teammates for the first time. So I think this was from like 2 years ago when we had it in China. Obviously, the last year we had to do kickoff online because we weren't able to travel because of Corona. And that's going to be the case for this year, but someday kickoff will come back, and it's actually going to be in Kyoto next, whenever we can do it. So kickoff happens around October. Then each of the students go back to their own home institutions or universities, and they, of course, connect like weekly via Zoom. It used to be Skype. Now it's Zoom, Slack, any other digital tool you can imagine that you're fortunate to have now. They work across that meeting, but also doing work like going to talk to farmers and doing interviews, or trying prototypes and realizing that a lot of these things don't work and saying, why doesn't it work? And then, of course, moving on to the next idea. And at some point throughout the year, usually somewhere around midway point of the project, one of the university travels to the other. So for this project, our students from KIT went to Swinburne in Australia for the winter presentation in March, where they're working together and ultimately presented together. And they also visited some farm and enjoyed their time while being in Melbourne. And the Myanmar people actually came during this time as well. After that, people go back to their own home institutions. The same continues, they work together. But at some point, the other travel happens as well. So in this case, Swinburne came to us very much close to the end of the project, really the last push. They did it together. Literally like all the fabrication of the machine that you saw happened around this time, also preparing for the final presentation. And then they kind of like went together to the final presentation in Silicon Valley, which is very much kind of what you see now, except like times 20, because of both the number of teams and the visitors that we have. So students are up on stage presenting, all the teams bring their prototypes and demonstrate what they've worked on. And a couple of years ago, the Sugar Network, the network of the universities, actually made a video just to show. So that was the last time we were actually able to do an expo together, because the last 2 years they've been on the cloud, which has also been a pretty cool experience. But I believe next year we'll be going back to San Francisco as the corona numbers are going down in most parts of the world. So whenever I talk about the schedule and the process, most people think that it's kind of like, okay, you think, and you build. But it's actually a lot of small cycles of prototyping assignments in this course, because we realized long time ago that we need to keep pushing ideas, building, trying, and oftentimes failing in order to get to something good. Because thinking for 9 months and building almost never works. So as students, what do you get out of being part of ME310 Shigar? Well, there's a couple of aspects of it. And one might be the softer side, which is this notion of an international network. Very rarely in any country do university students have an opportunity to work with people so intensely from abroad. I mean, you might have like a project where you might talk to people, but this is 9 really hard working months that comes together. And not just your teammates you work with, but through the entire network of universities, like people really do get to connect and have a network that is valuable after you even get to your professional lives. And I just realized I included this next slide in here as well. But a few years ago, we had some very interesting thing happen where a ME310 Shigar marriage happened. Not from KIT yet, but actually 2 students who were working together from Columbia and Stanford end up getting married, apparently. I wasn't there. I'm not suggesting this is the reason why you should come, but when people get together in intense reasons, things do happen. So yeah, that's kind of what kind of network you can imagine from being part of this. The second thing is working on something real. And as students, this is also another opportunity. You get to see so much. I come from an engineering background. This was the kind of projects that usually I had. The entire point was to create a control system to keep that ping pong ball in the middle. It's not a product. It doesn't create any value for anyone. It's just to show that you can make something, which is fun and educational, but it doesn't have that reality. I realize that this is probably not the case for a lot of design students, but even design students, I know a lot of projects that I've seen here are really more about putting imagination down on paper. I know there's a lot of research involved, but it's ultimately kind of getting to this futuristic concept. But here it's more about getting real and getting something that can truly be out there and be useful to people. And along that line, it's actually having impact on the world. Now, I'm not saying that every project will ultimately become products. Even a program like this, I would say the hitting average is not that high, but there are still a good amount of projects that have moved on from being student projects to corporate projects to actual products or services outside. And the one that we are often bringing up as an example because we worked on with Australia is Weibo, and the topic was new waterside leisure vehicle for goods. But the ultimate concept was this Segway on water. And what the team realized very early on was that it's actually fun to stand on water, but it's not easy. Maybe some of you are surfers, wakeboarders, like those are expert sports. Like you have to trip in water many times to get that. But if you just want to casually float on water or stand on water, that's sort of where they were going with the Weibo. And the thing we know about this is that the teams that were involved, or the team members that were involved, after the project was over, they actually ended up working with Yanmar to further develop the product and the concept. And when I talked to them, like they were like every other week, they were in like Okinawa or Guam, like testing or building and testing their prototype. This was like 4 years ago. 2 years ago, it got announced as a product. It was supposed to launch last year, but I believe because of Corona, it kind of got back down. But I recently saw on Access that it's now available in Okinawa. So it's actually something you can try. And I just kind of took a picture from the website or video from the website, but you can kind of see what it's like. And I still haven't got to try the new one yet. And of course, the last thing you get out of ME310 Shigar is the ability to innovate. I mean, this is an extreme training ground for people who do want to become innovators, people who do want to create products, create things that make a difference. And I often tell people that we live in a world of near infinite possibilities. There's so much you can do now with technology, but we also live in a world of increasing complexity and really unpredictable future. So as students, as you graduate, as you move into the world, for those of you who want to do this kind of innovative work, it's like trying to navigate a forest without a map. You have to find your own way and your own path forward. And we believe that to do so, you need skills, mindset, but also the confidence to be able to walk into this world. Now, I know not everyone's going to go into this world, but if this is something that interests you, this is, I believe, the kind of training that you would need from your education here at KIT. So I like to talk about bragging a little bit of like people who have been doing really cool things after they've gone through the program. One of my good friends back when I took the program at Stanford was this guy called Carl Dorkson. And he was working at IDEO, the consultancy, for a while. But after a while, he kind of wanted to do his own thing and ended up creating this startup called One Wheel, which is like a balancing board to go similar to a little bit of the motorized not roller skates, the skateboards, but much, much cooler and actually a lot safer because of the bigger wheel as well. From Finland, Linda Lucas, who's been actually quite famous in the world for her picture book, Hello Ruby. She was a student in the program as well. And I actually used to teach in Paris for 2 years, two and a half years. And one of the first students that took the program was an entrepreneur, well, is now an entrepreneur called Pierre Valade, who decided, this was around the time the iPhone was coming out, decided that he wanted to create the most beautiful calendar in the world. And it was called Sunrise Calendar. You guys are probably too young to have used it because about 5-6 years ago, it got bought by Microsoft. So now it's kind of part of the Outlook ecosystem, maybe unfortunately. But for a while, it was a very, very popular app. And on Japan side, I don't know if you know him, but Keita Nishiyama, he was also the first batch at KIT about 10 years ago. And he ended up going to Nomura Soken for a while, but then realized that's not what he wanted to do. And he's now actually in education, creating a juku for students to experience this kind of innovation more at the easier level, but for kids to be able to keep their creativity as they grow older so that regular schoolwork, especially Japanese schoolwork, doesn't kind of crush them into being robots. And he's also doing events within Japan. He calls it Innovation no Koshien. I can't quite translate that, but national competition for high school students. And of course, a lot of the students also go on to become regular employees and designers and engineers at companies as well. And 3 years ago, we started tracking where a lot of our students end up going. And turns out, it's the big companies that everyone wants to go to. Every so often, I'm hoping that someone decides on something different, but most of the time, students end up going here. They don't necessarily always stay though. So if you're interested in applying, a couple things of note. First is eligibility. Generally, ME310 or SUAR is a master's level program in most places around the world. We have it a bit interesting that because it crosses our academic year, if we do a master's, you can only take it at M1. So we've decided you can either join at M1 and you finish at M2, or join at B4 or M0, and then you finish at M1. So you can join either year. Every so often, we will actually accept a B3 if they don't want to do master's program here. But generally, we kind of suggest people against it, try to wait till their master's level. The other thing, it's actually not limited to students at this university. Every year we get one interesting, slightly radical student from another university who wants to join in the program, even though they don't get credit. And those tend to be the more interesting people. We actually we had one this year on Team Takeda. His name is Richard. He is in France. And he was supposed to join us in November, but because of Corona, he never made it to Japan. So for the last year, he was the only one who was joining from France remotely with the team with Team Takeda. You do need to be competent in English. You don't have to be perfect, but all the lectures, all the presentations, all the communication with your global partners do happen in English. Generally, we kind of, for the teaching side, ideally, we get people who are all really good in English. That's not possible in Japan, we realized. So we tried to do it so at least one person on the team has really good English skills, and then others might be still trying to catch up. But yeah, definitely some level of competency in English. Like if you don't understand at all what I'm saying right now, may not be the best fit. And last but not the least, we like people to be in the field of product innovation, service innovation. So ideally engineering, design, business, user research, or something in the field that works to that. So if you're in humanities or if you're more like, say, like history, it might not be the best fit because there's very little from your background to contribute to the program. The application is already open. You might have seen the application sheet on the table outside, but it's basically a one-page, not so long Google form in Japanese or in English that you can fill out due July 31st. And then after that, we'll have an interview with the teaching team, either on Zoom or usually in person. For KIT students, lucky for you, you do get credits. Global Innovation Program 1 and 2 is the actual class name. You get 8 credits in total in specific forms that I'm sure you can read there. And every year we have to announce at this point that we don't know how many people we can accept. Our target always is to have 2 to 4 projects. We can take 4 students per project. So that's 8 to 16 total students. But that also means we need to get 2 to 4 sponsors. And needless to say, Corona has been a bit tough on us. Nevertheless, we know we will happen because we have 1 sponsor already. So hopefully 2 or 3 more, knocking on wood. So that was a little bit long. Last bit, I want to finish with a video that students created a couple of years ago, kind of recapping their own experience. And I thought it was just kind of good to see what 1 year looks like.
Take me to your
So hopefully that gave you a lot of information on what we're about and maybe help you decide if you want to join or not.